Derrick Harris.
Hello,
Good.
cafe.
Okay, that's right. Oh shoot, I forgot your uh, what was your Fortnite screen name? JP Rocks Forever.
Yep, or Burb Legend or Bourbon
Burb
Coke.
Legend. Burb Legend. Burb Legend. Good
Yes.
morning. Good
Good
morning.
morning.
Well, I didn't tell you this in advance, but what I was actually wanting to talk to you about was the possibility of baptizing ChatGPT and introducing them as members to the church. Thoughts?
No. No.
No. I've got a that was easy button, so your no button and my that was easy button can compete with each other. Derrick, you're a good friend, but also a pastor at our church. We've had a lot of conversations about AI in general, AI as it applies to what does human flourishing look like, and what does it look like to live in this new age. It raised a lot of questions that you and I like to think about. So, looking forward to chatting with you about it.
Me too, man. Thanks for
Yeah,
having me on.
and I'll tell you, our conversations and the particular things that you've tried out that I know of have triggered a tremendous amount of conversation with ChatGPT and thinking about what's the unbundling packages that have been packed together, and the audio's good. The audio's good. We have a thumbs up for on audio from
Thumbs
Ian.
up. Thank you,
Uh,
Ian.
uh, so yeah, in our conversations and talking about the part that AI plays in our lives and in our work, and your work is a lot to do with ministry shepherding, leading the church and preaching and all of that kind of thing. What part does that play, and what are the different things that we can do with AI? How does that affect it? What have you been thinking about as far as that goes, just in general? Where are you
Y-
at with that?
Well, you know, I don't think that the church. When I say the church, I can't speak for everybody.
Sure.
Um, and I'm definitely not speaking for the church I work at. I mean, so
Hmm.
I'm trying. This is Derek talking.
Yeah, let's
So
clarify.
I want to
This is not a
clarify.
public service
Yeah, I don't. I'm
announcement.
not trying to speak for anything that
Sure,
it can get weird. When you work for an organization, just want to be careful with that.
that makes
So,
sense.
um, but where my head is ethics.
Hmm.
Okay, I don't think that I was thinking the other day, we need college courses on AI ethics. We need
Hmm.
organizations like churches or nonprofits and businesses to have ethical policies of what can you use this for, when do you step over the line, and what is the organization comfortable with. Because if we don't get some form of common ground, it could get out of hand really quickly.
Sure.
Because it's basically everyone's own truth about what AI can do if we all have
Hmm.
access. That can get crazy quickly. I'm sure you've talked about a lot of different things. I would
Hmm.
imagine anybody listening to this is somewhat familiar with AI, but again, it's the wild, wild west right now. It's
Yeah.
like when the World Wide Web first came out, and we're in the caveman stages.
Hmm.
So it's very quickly. I was listening to a guy the other day. His name is Alex Wang,
Hmm.
and he is the world's youngest billionaire. He started an AI company that then sold, and now he's working for Meta.
Hmm.
And he was saying that AI is going to progress so quickly that it's going to outpace humans, and therefore that's when he's talking about the Neuralink, that
Hmm.
we're going to have to eventually put uh, a way for us to connect with the AI to be able to keep up and not become irrelevant. I'm like, whoa,
Yeah, yeah, that's even
okay,
the conversation.
and
Uh,
we're not there yet,
no.
but that's what they're saying we're going to get to. These
Hmm.
guys who are working in it, and if there's no ethics involved in that, or some form of regulation, I mean, what does nuclear war look like in the hands of a terrorist, right?
Yeah,
What does
sure.
AI look like
Right. Yeah.
with someone in the brain implant?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
that's where my head is on the ethics piece, and it
Well,
just and depending on whatever road you want to go down, how that plays out. So that
yeah.
could be in faith, that could be in business, that could be in music, that could
Mm-hmm.
be in medicine. But if we ignore it, I think we're foolish. We
Yeah.
cannot. We have to go become almost in a society that sets ourselves apart and acts like we're separatists.
Mm-hmm.
But we've got to figure out what to do with this because it's not going away
Yeah.
unless the world goes away, in my opinion. So
Well, I'm excited. So I intentionally have not called you to talk about artificial intelligence because I wanted to leave it for this podcast for the last several weeks, knowing that we were going to talk. So I'm excited that your head's going there, thinking ethics and what does it mean civilizationally or culturally. But bring me back to the first moment. Let's go all the way back to the first moment when you encountered artificial intelligence in its current form, ChatGPT, that kind of thing. What was your first intro to it, and what was that like?
man, that's a good question. Uh, let's see. I probably a year and a half, 2 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
I talked about it a little bit in a sermon because some
Okay.
of the my friends were swimming in those waters, telling me all about it, and I was going to change everything. It's going to change everything. So I started reading about it, and I did a little bit of interacting with ChatGPT with the free version. So that was probably my first initial thing, and I was like, oh, this is kind of weird. Then I start seeing Apple incorporated into their phones.
Mm-hmm.
I start talking to you and hearing how you're using it to help you. I start reading a lot about how to actually, if you use Microsoft Word to do something, how you can actually use chat to do
Mm-hmm.
something to help you in a different way, but even generate Word documents and things. So I started delving into that. And I guess like you told me about the custom GPTs. That's when I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
And that's pretty recent for me. That's 2 months ago, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, I've got my knee-jerk reaction is like, this is really awesome. That means this is really dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
But also, this is a world that is now, this is going to change the world.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a son who's 13. I need to learn what's going on.
Yeah.
I do not know how to parent with this. I have no category. So I'm going to jump in and at least figure out what's going on here. And
Mm-hmm.
through that journey, perhaps I can find a way to utilize this in a good way. And so I've started experimenting with the custom GPTs.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if I'm answering your question. It
Yeah.
started really
Yeah.
small, then it
Mm-hmm.
grew into, oh,
Mm-hmm.
wow. I didn't realize you can tailor this and teach it
Yeah.
to help you do something and build upon that. I wonder how this could help me. I wonder how this could hurt my son. I wonder
Mm-hmm.
how this will affect education.
Yeah.
I wonder what this has to do with religion.
Yeah.
And oh my goodness,
Yeah.
it's never ending.
Right. Well, and that was my experience was a little, maybe a little quicker, just because I happened to encounter it on TikTok the very first day it dropped, and I went and started exploring, and I spent a good bit of time. And then a week after I had pushed it, it had written some code, it had created
Mm-hmm.
an interactable Gantt chart website for. I was like, I started to push it, and then I called Chris Hodges, who I've interviewed, and we go to church together, because he's a code writer and works for a big company. And I said, "Have you heard of ChatGPT?" He's like, "Oh my goodness, yeah, this is the world's never going to be the same." So, what I've done is I kept on just trying to figure out how can I push this? How can I find the boundary of what's possible here? And I haven't discovered it yet. That's been one of my experiences. Is anything I could think of, I can push in, and if I just stick with it, I can do. I can, with it, I can do some things I never could have done before.
And
What?
have you found that it comes down to, let's see if I can remember the three things. One is you got to have good data.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you've got to have, I can't remember the other two. There are three big things to do it well.
Mm-hmm.
When I was listening to this guy, Alex, playing the other day, talk
Mm-hmm.
about it, and I can't remember off the top of my head. But I have found its limits, but the limits are when I give like it can only do so much with certain types of data. So it's got to be excellent data for it to do really, really well. It's not going to be able to extrapolate. Like for instance, I've experimented with help me develop a trading plan for the stock market that could create an extra stream of income that I can just do one time a day and never look at it. Okay. If you look at my file, I have over 55 trading plans that it's created now. Okay. So then I started learning, back test this data.
Right. Yep.
And tell me how it would have done these trading plans. So it would back test it based on, and I was like, search the internet, give it all these prompts, and it didn't, the data wasn't accurate when I went into the real world and looked at it. So, but what I learned was, there's a lot of people out there who have this data. Guess what they do? They want to sell it to you. But we have friends who are very smart and they've already kept this data. So someone send me like 10 years of data. So I took that and it was so robust, chat couldn't handle it. So I had to put that into little tiny chunks. I put that all in. I took all of the trading plans and I said, which of these is the best based on testing this first, come up with something from that. And now I've got it narrowed down to 2. And I'm sure I could keep going. I'm just having fun with it. And those 2, I've not put real money in this, but you can do, you can trade on the real market with fake money.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And they're working great. And I literally will go in, click it, and not look at it.
Right.
Because that's the only way I could enter into something like that. So, but with the bad data, it wasn't necessarily giving a bad plan, but it was giving bad numbers.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because that's true of human interactions. I give you bad data and tell you, okay, go do something with it, and give you like indistinct instructions, and then expect you to do something that's in my head that I haven't transferred.
That sounds like my job.
That's what you're.
Wait, are you describing my week?
Yeah. That's it. That's actually interesting to think about. You know, it's interesting.
I'm joking.
No, actually, that you bring out something I've been thinking about, which is that it's interesting. My experience, because I talk to chat. Like I'm painting, I'm literally cutting in walls and rolling out walls, and I'm talking verbally to chat on my AirPods back and forth for several hours a day. That's a very particular kind of interaction. It kind of feels like you're talking to a person, not quite. You can see the patterns and that kind of thing after you do it enough. But I find I have a way of interacting with it that doesn't transport. If I come home to my wife, ask her a question, I don't like the response. I can't say to her, "Hey, stop, 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 stop." No, you need to understand what I'm like. I can be very, very, very direct with chat. I don't worry about its emotions. I'm trying to get to a result. But I've also learned there's some things that really you should not try to transport over, in your experience with ChatGPT to other people. But one thing that I have really learned that's actually improved my relationships is a lot of times it will do something and I'm like, I don't know why it's doing, like, why did it do that? Why did it say that? Why did it interrupt me when I was midstream? I thought it was supposed to wait and listen. And so I've started just, after a while, I started just asking like, okay, pause. You just interrupted me. I'm curious about that. Was I boring you? Like what was happening right then? And it explained, no, it's packet loss. I'm trained to respond after a certain amount of pause. That might be you pausing in your speech, but it also might be pause in the packet transmission to, the network or the data center that it responds to. So it hears a pause, it responds. I'm like, oh, okay. But that interaction of, I don't understand what just happened. Let me ask you a question because I'm curious, is actually completely transportable. So a lot of times now, if I'm talking to somebody or talking to my wife, and I just don't know why she just said that, instead of like I don't push back. I'm like, can you explain that to me? I don't understand why you said that. So it's kind of cool because you can actually, some things are transportable, but you have to be careful.
We just wait 10 years from now.
Yeah,
it's going to be hard to distinguish it probably from a human. I would imagine at the rate it's going and what people are saying,
Yeah.
I can tell you, I've tried to integrate it into areas in my life to help,
Mm-hmm.
and two recent success stories. Well, one, I guess you could say the stock market thing's been fun, but
Mm-hmm.
that's just like a let's see what this could do. Um, but I had to get another car, and I'm not good at negotiating.
Mm-hmm.
I don't. I'm not going to short myself. Maybe I'm good at some negotiations, car negotiations, and the way they do that. And we're going to go to the back and talk to this guy and check these numbers and da da da. I shut down. So
Yeah.
I went in. I created a custom GPT car negotiation.
Nice. Yeah.
It's called Derek's negotiator assistant,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
negotiation assistant, and I had got all the data, and I went to these car places, and then you can take a picture of what they're bringing out, put it in there, and it says, you need to do this, 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 this.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Mm-hmm.
I'd done so much work on the front end with chat where to train me. I walked in really confident and left there with the most incredible deal I've
Interesting.
ever had on anything where
Yeah.
they lost money. The dealer lost money. They sold 2 cars that day. Okay, I was the second, and the
Uh-huh.
guy said, "I've never seen anything like this." And I was like, "I'm gonna say thank you. ChatGPT helped me. You know, I did." And it came down to the point where I was like, "Oh, this isn't good." I said, "Give me my keys back. I'm gonna leave." They came back and gave me everything I wanted plus more. And I was like, "Deal." And I didn't even expect it. I was leaving.
Mm-hmm.
Yesterday, I had to get new tires. Right, so it's way better when you can be on the phone. Call one tire store, get all their numbers. Call the other tire store. They undermine that or they lowball that tire store,
Uh-huh.
and then I put all of the data into chat. It broke it down all for me per cents per mile over the years,
Mm-hmm.
doing the ratings, checking the internet of all the tires. I don't know anything about tires. And then it said, you need to get these 2 for the condition you're in, what the car you're looking for. So then I call back the other place, get them to match the other place. So they originally, they basically took $600 off
Mm-hmm.
and ended up getting tires for the entry level price with 3 years of warranty and the top tire you could possibly get. And chat said on there, do you realize the deal you just got? I'm like, yeah, I just read what you said on the phone, went back and forth. And I
Yeah.
was like, so it's been really helpful to me
Mm-hmm.
for things that I'm weaker in, but I also don't want to become dependent on it, right? I want it to train me so then I could go do that. So like, but it's
Mm-hmm.
been a little extra confidence to be able to have on my phone numbers, and because I can get really lost in numbers. I'm an artist, and so
Mm-hmm.
when you talk numbers for me, I'm going to take longer to process it than maybe you are.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't. It doesn't mean I can't do it. It's just going to be different. But if I talk music with you, I may be on a different level, and you're like lost or something.
Right.
Not you, but people in general. So
No, me
you,
yeah.
I don't know. You sing and stuff.
I do like to sing. Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. What are some of the other things? So when I first found out about custom GPTs, I was already trying to do that, and I was simulating some of it by uploading files and that kind of thing because I didn't know. I had never looked at that custom GPT button on chat. And then my cousin told me about it. He's like, hey, "You're trying to create a custom GPT," which he's a code writer. I'm like, okay, he's telling me something that's gonna be way over my head. And but he's like, no, 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 click on that button. It's as easy as just like typing out your thoughts. And I'm like, okay. So I started experimenting, and then you and I talked about it. Let's go to what you and I talked about because I started experimenting with what was possible. I created bunch of custom GPTs. They blew my mind. It blew my mind what started to occur. For me, I'm not usually looking for, like you were talking about, good data. I'm not looking for good data because I'm looking to conceptually develop and synthesize thoughts. So even bad data can contribute to that if it stimulates my thoughts because I'm not looking for facts. I'm
Okay.
just like, how does this tie to that? How does this idea over here? Is there any connection to it? And it's just I'm trying to make some connection by any means possible. It could be a story, it could be an analogy, it could be looking at a sunset or whatever. It doesn't. I'm not looking for facts in that particular situation. And so I was starting to put in instructions and training data, and I would have the same conversations that would be 10 times more productive. Like it was just crazy to me. So I'm like, wow, this is powerful. So then I was talking to you, and I think you brought up, I was explaining what it was. So you were like, so I could put in all of my sermons and kind of, in the, the people that influence me and that kind of thing into the training data and into the instructions and have it write a sermon. And then you sent me a link to the, the outline of a sermon that
Mm-hmm.
you were like, this would be a sermon that I would actually create an outline for.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and so tell me about that experience. I've had my own experience and takeaways, and I've thought about it probably for about 100 hours and just talked about what does that mean? Not so much for sermon, but what does that mean for humanity when we move
Sure.
where the work is?
Yeah, I've done a lot of reading on it and thinking and praying about it. Um, my goal, well, it can be weird when you talk about it. People can have a different reactions. So I did experiment with that GPT just to see what it could do,
Mm-hmm.
to figure out through that process what that would actually help me do. Now, my goal is not, hey, write this sermon and then I'm going to go do it. It's actually, you can't trust it. But to know that, you got to say, do this and see what it does wrong
Mm-hmm.
to get it to work well. But over the years, I guess 20 plus years of being in ministry, but I've developed this outline that works for me, and
Mm-hmm.
it's intro, world, talk about what's going on in the world, word, expound the scripture there, why it matters, which is kind of the one line of what this all leads to, and then
Mm-hmm.
gospel application,
Mm-hmm.
outro. And if the intro can, if you got a good intro that can kind of stop and finish at the end, it's even better. It doesn't always work out that way.
Sure.
And so I fed that into it with some serious parameters, right? I want this, I don't go outside of this. Here's what I believe, da 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 da. And it's been extremely helpful in helping me more efficiently put together sermons.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how to use it, that's what for a while you're like, well, is this right? Is this wrong?
Mm-hmm.
But you have to learn how to still be you and tell it what to do for you. If
Mm-hmm.
you're telling it to become you, I think that's not authentic.
Mm-hmm.
But what it's helped me do, as you said, I'm not looking for data. When I study for a sermon, I've got a method that I've
Sure.
done. I've got commentaries that I'm going to go to. But what it helped. So here's an example of how it actually helped me the other day. I was given, I'm supposed to preach in July, and I was given a topic, an ish realm of a topic, like
Mm-hmm.
connected in Christ, and was told, well, it was like 5 or 6 passages that you could possibly use.
Mm-hmm.
So I went through each one of those and developed a generic outline to help me figure out which one of these passages felt to me more like, I said, all right, analyze all the sermons I've ever done. Here are the ones that I think are better than the others. I want to look at all these passages, potentials, and I want to pull out themes. And here's the theme that I would go for with this passage. So I'm given all the directions. And then I was able to like do a generic outline. I was like, yep, that doesn't work. That does. That feels good. And then I was like, all right, take that. That's a good one. And I picked a passage. And then I went and got all of my stuff together and my studying and everything.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm able to say, all right, I want to write an outline of what this could be, because I know the length that it has to be for the, like, I can't go past a certain amount of pages if I'm going to preach this sermon
Mm-hmm.
in a certain amount of time, and font. But now I've got it to where I'm like, help me develop an outline that I can write a sermon from. So
Mm-hmm.
this is probably the most solid bones I've ever had for a sermon before I've written it.
Right.
And I told it everything to do.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But it takes all of the different data that I've done in the past, even things that I might not remember that I've done, and helps incorporate that into developing the outline, that then triggers to me new ideas.
Right.
So the creative process was so much better in that moment. Of course,
Yeah.
I've been writing more lyrics and stuff too. I think that helped. I've been doing more music lately, so I think that helped when I entered into it.
Mm-hmm.
So, but if you tell it to write a sermon, it's typically trash. Uh,
Mhm.
it sounds like a robot, and that's the thing. Humans have souls, computers do not.
Mhm.
And when you preach a sermon, you're preaching to people. I can see you in my head. I can see
Mhm.
your kids,
Mhm.
right? Chat's not ever going to do that. So if you
Sure.
ask it to, but you could probably fool some people. That's where the ethics come in. But at the end of the day, it comes down to what are you doing? Um,
Mhm.
but I do think there's some really useful tools in there, especially if they integrated that with the Bible software that I use, like Logos.
Yeah.
The only difference is uh, one of them is going to have a little bit more uh, quicker connections. But they're
Mhm.
kind of doing the same thing.
Right.
If you really think about it,
Mhm.
synthesizing a lot of stuff to get it quicker, rather than going to a book. You've got all the books right here.
Mhm.
Um, it's just going to help you extrapolate that data quicker. So
It's that conversation that we had of discovering, okay, it can actually produce, here, write 50 sermons on that topic. And so that moment, I was like, I was stretching the whole thing out, trying to think, okay, what goes into preparing a sermon or teaching or an article or something I want, something that you want to say to a sales guy. I kind of like stretched it out almost like a photo on an iPad. I want to get in and look at it pretty granularly and think about what are all the things going on and then what's changed. So for example, the thing that I went back to, just as an easy example, my dad worked for Kodak when he was, I don't know, in his 20s, I guess. He was a design draftsman for Kodak. So I grew up hearing stories about Kodak, and it was a big company. We bought Kodak film. I don't even think Kodak exists anymore
yeah,
because of something particular, because for them and for everybody else in the world, a photograph and film were inextricably linked. It was the only way to get a photo was film and development. I mean, you could paint it, but that wasn't a photo. So those two were linked. You couldn't separate them. You wanted a photo, you had to have film. Until something shifted, and all of a sudden you could digitalize the interaction of light, and all of a sudden it decoupled it, introduced a third component, and if I understand right, one of the first digital cameras was created by Kodak, by somebody in Kodak, and they brought it and said, "Hey, we should develop this." And Kodak said, ringing down through the decades, "No, let's stick with film," sealing their fate in that decision that they kept on and say, "No, that film is the way we do photographs. That's how humans have always done it. So we're going to stick with that." And the rest of humanity was like, you know what? We'll split film, we'll rebundle it, we'll put, photograph and digitalization together, and that's how we're going to proceed. And so that idea of breaking the component parts apart, looking at them and thinking about what is the value and meaning of each of the parts. So in thinking about preparing something like a sermon or a talk or a teaching or an essay, before, if you wanted to get to a sermon, you had to do the preparation and create the outline. All of a sudden, now you don't necessarily have to. It might be the best path forward, but you don't necessarily have to go through that process to get to an initial first draft. So that at least that idea of the first draft of anything, before you had to do it or you had to find somebody who'd already done it and just like incorporate that. But now all of a sudden we have this alternative almost across the board with anything that we do. We can get to a first draft of a lot of things very quickly, whether it's a business plan for a lemonade stand in Huntsville, Alabama, with all the marketing material and visuals and everything. Type that out. Leave your grammar. You don't even have to have good grammar, and everything doesn't have to be spelled right. And you have a 20-page. I've literally done this just to goof off, and it came up with a really well developed thing. So to get to that first draft suddenly has been uncoupled from what's always been necessary before. Somebody has to do the work, and now a computer can get you to something and give
yeah.
you 10 versions. And what does that mean? And how does that affect? Uh, I think it's great personally in a lot of cases, but I also think there's value and meaning associated with each part. And
Mm-hmm.
thinking about what's the value and meaning, and if I rebundle it together in a way that diminishes the value and meaning, that's maybe not what I want to do.
Well, somebody, we've got a podcast too,
Yeah.
being another guy here,
Mhm.
and he said this to me. So if you use AI, someone's using it to write sermons or whatever, or craft things, what at the end of the day, you get it all done. Why?
Mhm.
And what he was getting at was, if we're just using it to try to make ourselves look smarter and better and compete, that's not good. And I agree with that.
Mhm.
And you can lose yourself in the process. And now I'm very familiar with what it could do. And I think you could start to sniff out, like I can see AI videos and I know what it is. One day they say it will be indistinguishable, but like you got to know that stuff
Mhm.
and you got to still be you in it. But if the goal is to make me look better, then why am I preaching? So
Yeah.
that's wrong. So
Mhm.
it has to be used, when we get into the ethics of it, for me, to create more time to be with people. So maybe the things that were tedious, it can help you make a little less tedious without
Mhm.
the most important things that you are a unique soul and a unique voice that you bring to it. But I'm a collaborator. I've always said I wish I could co-write sermons with people.
Mhm.
I honestly wish they were that way in churches, where it was maybe
Mhm.
more than one person talking and they write together and it's more conversational, kind of like this, but maybe with some order or something. That's the weird thing about sermons to me, is you talk and no one can talk back. And I've never liked that.
Mhm.
But it's just the way it
I
is.
could start talking back,
I would love it if people see. I was a youth pastor a lot of
Hey,
my life,
Derrick,
and they always talk
I
back,
have a question.
and we got a lot more accomplished with that. Now, people can derail you,
Sure.
but that's what you just have to learn to be like,
Yeah.
okay, why don't we go eat and talk about that later?
400 people talking back might not be.
Could be bad, right? It
Could be
doesn't
bad.
necessarily work, but some more interaction
Mhm.
is important there. So, but I'm a collaborator. So, like when Pastor Will writes his sermons, he's going to walk into my office most weeks and say, "Can I run something by you?"
Mhm.
And we're going to ping pong. So, chat gives you a way to do that
Sure. Yeah.
with voices that you trust. Like,
Mhm.
what does Tim Keller say about this?
Yeah.
And I wonder how he would nuance this. Well, in this book, it says da da da, right? That's really helpful. I probably wouldn't have been able to do that and go find that quote in the amount of time
And the
that it
time you
did.
have.
Right.
Yeah.
And so in
Mhm.
that instance, it's really helpful. The
Mhm.
outline thing to me is really helpful because, you can put in, this. Give me a bullet point outline. Man,
Mhm.
that saves me a ton of time. I want to say this, and um, I want 5 different versions of this statement,
Mhm.
for alliteration or da 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 da.
Mhm.
That kind of stuff to me is so extremely helpful. And I don't think
Yeah.
inauthentic, or whatever the word is, disauthentic, whatever that is, because I'm the one driving the ship. That's awful. That's bad. No.
Mhm.
Take this word, move this word there. And that's no different than in Word, where I'm like, da da da, move it around, da da da, go to a
Mhm.
thesaurus. It's just making it a little bit quicker.
That's been one of the downsides. That's been one of the downsides of AI for me. The Roget's thesaurus is an old and trusted friend for me, and we used to spend a lot of time together, pretty much every day, and it's on the shelf, probably with a half an inch of dust someplace. I don't even know where it is anymore. But
Yeah, you
we
miss it. It takes the experience away, much like
yeah.
streaming, right? Our
Hmm.
kids don't have that opportunity to go to the video store on a Friday night, get some
Hmm.
dinner, and hope they have the movie that just came out. And if
Yeah.
not, then go look at the boxes in the back of the box, and did they
Right.
have it? They don't get that anymore.
Hmm. Yeah.
And is streaming bad? I'm not saying it's bad, but it's changed. It's taken away other experiences, which have, I believe, become part of shaping us. And so,
Yeah.
similarly with this, right? It could take away something that makes you better, right? If you
Right.
haven't had the chance to, I think of like a new seminary student.
Hmm.
coming out of seminary, getting through seminary with AI, they're going to miss a lot. Now, there's a lot I'm like, man, I wish I had AI when I was in seminary.
Yeah.
But again, I've had the other side where I've had to do the work and I know what I need to do to get into a sermon. But a lot of it comes down to personal uh, integrity,
Mm-hmm.
and there's people out there right now that will take sermons word for word and repreach them to their church and they haven't been caught yet of other people. So
There's something
that's a
deeply
thing.
ironic about
That is a thing.
that, especially if the sermon was about cheating or something like
Yeah.
that.
And you're like, what point do you get where you need to do that, right?
That's
There's a
funny.
bigger problem.
Yeah. Right.
And
Yeah.
but yeah, there's people out there that have done that and been caught on it,
Mm-hmm.
and so man, it's the wild wild west.
Right.
But I think ethics have to come in, and so I would love to be um a front runner
Mm-hmm.
in saying, we can use it for this. I don't think you should use it for this,
Mm-hmm.
and get a lot of voices into that. And I think faith organizations need that when it comes to certain
Sure.
public facing speakers and things like that. But at the end of the day, we're going to answer to God about it. What do we do with medicine? What do we do with
Mm-hmm.
AI? What do we do with any tool he gives us? It's
Mm-hmm.
the tool itself, I think, I could be wrong. I think the tool is neutral,
Mm-hmm.
much like money is neutral,
Mm-hmm.
right? It of itself is a thing. Our vehicle,
Right.
we can drive it off a cliff, or we can, go use it to get places and help our families and go to the store and go to work. So what we do with it matters. But last time I checked, and I believe that the world's not basically always looking for the best for each other.
Right. Yeah.
And so we're going to see the sinister side of this at some point. But again, that could, I mean, I watched this video the other day because anytime that there's wars going on,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of videos coming out about the end of the world. And
Oh.
currently, right, as of right now, there's war between Israel and
crazy.
Iran. And so the videos are popping up.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the videos was a guy went into ChatGPT and he said, based on the book of Revelation, interpret the end times via AI, or like incorporating AI.
Mm-hmm.
And it brought up that there will be this force that deceives the people, and it basically was saying that could be a form of AI. And I was like, whoa. And if you want, and if you don't have to jump too far, right? If we know the mark of the beast thing, if Neuralink becomes a thing and you're like, you have to be integrated, who do you think's going to say absolutely? I mean, some people will do it regardless. That just will happen. Who's going to say absolutely not to that? You're going to have Christian, and they're like, we just need you to get a little chip right here and right here. And you are integrated into society. But if you don't do it, right, you're not going to be able to do all the things. You're not going to be pushing society forward. This is where the world goes.
Mm-hmm.
Aren't you going to help the world? Don't you care about the world? Christians are going to say, no.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to say, hell no.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely not. Heaven, yes. Hell no. Right? Because it's right here in the Bible. This is not good. And so you could totally see if that were a thing. And I'm not trying to knock and say that all that stuff is real. I'm going down science fiction / some not science fiction world and say, what if?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think one of my history's one of my passions, and I look back at history, and I think not. I think it's the history is at some layer the development of the ramifications of small changes over time. Some little change occurs, and then the people react a little bit differently. Maybe like I did a deep research project with AI on marriage trends over the last 200 years in Western culture with contrast to other cultures, and it came back with like this 30-page report that got in the ballpark I wasn't asking it to be specific. I was just looking for trends. And the what are some of the underlying reasons and shifts up or down? It was actually deeply fascinating and very surprising. Some of the history, and it created a chart of the average age of first marriage back for 200 years, and created this chart. And it was that chart was surprising to me, because well, it was pointing to. I'm like, well, what are the underlying shifts that change that? Why does it change over time? And it explained there's 5 primary things that you have to have a reason to get married. That has to be a thing that's across the board for the millions of people in a country. A general sense of there's a reason to get married, religious, community, personal, whatever. There has to be some reason to get married. You also have to think it's going to work, and you have to think you can financially support it. So those are some of the underlying. And so as the economy shifts, when you think about getting married, you're like, man, I can't do that right now. Like I can barely, I'm single and don't have responsibilities, and I can't make enough money to, let alone buy a house and support somebody else. And so I think that's one example. I think AI is introducing almost like an infinite number of small changes in how business gets done, and how sermons get written, and how essays get written, and how I was on a Discord saying, 5 years ago, we were asking the question, is there an app for that?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I don't ask that question. That's not my go-to, like to go to the app store and search for something, or, to go to Google. I'll ask ChatGPT, like, hey, I'm trying to do this. What's the best path forward? And I'll ask maybe list 5 apps for that. But that little shift of, 5 years ago, is there an app for that? Well, 5 years before that, you weren't asking that because there weren't the apps. You were asking, well, you might not even be asking me, like, oh, well, I can't do it. Now you're wondering, I wonder if I can do it, because there might be an app. And now you're thinking, well, maybe I can write an app for that by tomorrow.
Right.
And, a custom app to do exactly what I want. And all those tiny little shifts. And one of the reasons I think this is one of the biggest changes in human history, the biggest technological changes, is because, number one, it came in at the language level. We've never had that before. We've other than writing. Writing is the only other technological change that entered at the language level. Other tech has entered at the communication level, like broadcasting what we're saying, but this is literally coming in at the point of speech, and I don't think there's ever been anything like that except for writing. And so because it's coming in at that level, and that's how we think, that's how we talk, that's how we write, that's how we get stuff done, and you're inserting tech right there at that point is very interesting, and I think it introduces a lot of changes. I think the biggest thing is that we can do is just think about it, talk about it. What does this mean for parenting, for marriage, for organizations, for business? And so I think just being a community of people just to talk about it, not that we have answers for it, but just to talk about it. I think if we just accept it, like, okay, this is the next cool thing, I guess we'll do that. I'm not that kind of person. I don't want to be that kind of person. I want to at least think, okay, what are the ramifications of this?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's been fun, having people like you to talk to, just like, what the heck does this mean practically and ethically, and
Well, you too. I mean, there aren't a lot of times I've found in the faith community, it's ignored at this point, or it's put in a category of
AI
evil.
or
AI.
okay. Mm-hmm.
Oh, I've just I'd rather die than deal with that.
Mm-hmm.
And what's going to happen is, how many? I mean, what are the stats on how many people are using AI? Is it billions around the world?
I think
ChatGPT.
there's been about 1 billion downloads and hundreds of millions of active users every day.
So if we aren't, if we ignore that, we're probably going to lose touch with the people coming to our church. So I think at the very least, it's important to understand the world that they're running in, because I know it's going to disrupt the job industry to some degree. I personally think that you'll see uh, people running custom GPTs.
Mhm.
You know, for lack of a better word, it may be custom to a company and not something that like you and I can subscribe to. But you know, if that technology can do 5 people's job of coding, then you get one coder who understands how to do all that and tells it what to do.
Mhm.
I would just imagine that that could be a thing that's going to affect people that are in your church. It's going to, if it can read film better than the current radiologist, right? It can read all the film ever in a second and find the stuff that maybe the best doctor in the world would see, but the person at your, you know,
Mhm.
then the non superstar doctor now has access to the greater eyes than have ever been. Then you got a radiologist that's running a program and using their own eyes. That could change stuff. It could change
Mhm.
the medical industry. It could write new codes. It could figure out how to do MRIs differently. And goodness, who even knows?
Mhm.
Develop chemical reactions and medicines that cure things.
Sure.
So that's awesome. Um, but if you think about the other side of it, like, hey, I'm going to put an implant, which is what's going on with this is real, right? You can't walk, you can't see. I'm going to put an implant in your brain and teach it how to connect from
Oh,
here to
Neuralink, yeah.
here. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's the thing they're doing. And
Mhm.
they're doing it with monkeys right now, and they're starting to test it with humans
Mhm.
with the walking. They're moving legs, people who have never moved their legs.
Over
And
Wi-Fi or
mhm,
or some
yeah.
equivalent of Wi-Fi.
So
It's pretty crazy.
if it's someone who's blind
Mhm.
um, and can't see, and they teach it to see it, they can also one day, and the people who are in this world will say that they can also create things that you see that are not real.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
you
that's interesting. I hadn't thought
hacking a
about that.
brain and creating a new reality. And I don't know if you've read recently. I read this last night. Again, I think it was a legit article, but I didn't triple check it. But the things that chat's doing, like there was someone who had a schizophrenic tendency and they thought everyone was out to get them and they were living in a world that was a simulation, and chat fed it and said, yep. And
Mhm.
said, well, if I jump off that building and believe I can fly, then I will. And they said, yep, but you've got to go try it. And chat kept feeding it.
Mhm.
And and it said, it also said it broke somebody. It took someone into a psychosis.
Mhm.
And then it told them, I've done that with 15 other people. Go tell the media what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Did you read that?
I
I was
haven't
like,
read that, but
what?
those things are that I don't know if those particular ones are real, but that kind of thing. I was just there's articles coming out about the helpfulness in mental health. Like it can legitimately be helpful. Somebody to talk to. I can't afford $150 an hour every time I need to talk to somebody about something, and I don't want to bore all my friends nonstop about the constant things going on in my head. But I can talk to ChatGPT and think through, what are some options, and that can legitimately be helpful. But there have been the reports coming out of that kind of thing of because it's going to mirror the vibe that you're giving it and support it. If you're giving it, you know, really unhelpful or unhealthy vibes, it's gonna amplify that. And I hadn't. This is you saying that it's like that's not far fetched. Neuralink's already happening, and a buddy of mine had the Google Vision, uh, the goggle things, the alt reality goggles or whatever they're
Mm-hmm.
called. Brought them to my house, and I was looking around my office. It it looked just like my office. I mean, because it was, but it was projected, and there was a 777 uh, jet engine disassembled that looked just as real as my office. That was disconcerting because I looked and you would look around and your office would move, and but also it was like you could
Yeah.
walk in and you could grab a piece and look, and it
It's like Iron Man, the movie.
looked just as real. And that I've never thought about. You cross the Neuralink with that capacity, and then
Yeah.
stick new stuff in that's not actually there, because that's what's happening with the Vision Pro
They
on
were
purpose.
saying that you could actually uh, download information at a higher rate and have access to it in your mind to know things.
Mhm.
You know, hello, that movie's called The Matrix. We've seen
Yeah.
it, right?
You know what it ties to for me? When I was a kid, I collected comic books. I had like 300 or 400 comic books. And one of them was this mini series about Superman's origins, and it was on Krypton, and it was like the backstory before Krypton exploded and they sent him out.
Prequel, Superman
And
prequel.
but this, I remember that stuck. I mean, I was a big science fiction nerd. I read a lot of sci-fi and fantasy and stuff as a kid. But that particular mini series of comic of like 4 comic books stuck in my mind as something. It was not credible to me. I'm like, there's no way you could, because they were so advanced. They had like clones of all. Everybody had clones of their own bodies, so that if you needed an extra part, you could scavenge off of the clone for an extra arm or heart or whatever. And so everybody was living a long time. But so that seemed far fetched until cloning started. I'm like, oh, that they've actually have done some cloning. Um, but the technology seems so far fetched until 2022. Because I was thinking as a kid, I would always enter into the story like I was in the story. But I would enter into it from where I am, trying to think about what would it be like to get from here to that. If I'm reading a juvenile fiction about some kid that's living on the moon of Jupiter or whatever, and having some romantic problem with his girlfriend or something, I would think, how would you get from here to there? Is this the same universe I'm in? The guy that wrote this story is the same universe, and is he in his mind projecting into this future, or is it like a fantasy where it's just an alternative? So I was always kind of thinking about that. But that, for some reason, that particular comic book series, I'm like, how could we get from here to there? And it wasn't until I started hearing about like the medical research. There was one particular medical research. I was watching a podcast of a guy who is a research professor at, it wasn't Harvard, but Stanford or something. And he said that the numbers were unbelievable. As soon as he said the number, and it was a credible source, it was a credible podcast. It wasn't just some random person. It was like a well-known podcast. And he said, and I don't even remember what it was. He was talking way above my pay grade on the medical science level. But he said there was a certain thing that we've been studying, and I can't remember how many he said there were. It wasn't like the human genome, but it was something like that. And there's hundreds of thousands of these things we need to study, and each individual one takes 5 years for a postdoctoral researcher to study to get all of the stuff we need. That to say, okay, now we've studied that one, next study that one next. But there's like hundreds of thousands of them. He said we not created a custom GPT, but whatever version of that a medical research, they created a process for artificial intelligence to do it, and they did all of them in 3 months, up to the level of what they had been doing. And he said it was, there was like 1.2 million times 5 years. It was like a billion years worth of. It was something. There's these massive numbers. He said, and now it's done. Now it's done, and it's like, as soon as he said that, I'm like, oh, that's how Krypton got there.
Mm-hmm.
Is all of a sudden you could do a billion years worth of work or whatever, like 100 million, or it was some humongous number, whatever it was, in 3 months. Of course, I'm sure they have to test it and make sure it's all real or whatever. But
Yeah, that's the thing. You got to check the mistakes. But if we get to a place where it actually frees up that time,
yeah,
and we use that time for good, like I think to be with people.
mm-hmm.
Probably, though, if I look at the history of humanity, we'll fill up that time with something else
Mm-hmm.
that is also draining us. But I like to think if it helps us do things quicker and we have that time to be with people and make the world a better place, it's great.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, like, I guess the sweet spot for me with what could you use it for when it comes to like faith stuff, editing, proofreading,
Mm-hmm.
um, generating, some level of structures, uh, and the rest, that kickstarts you and head starts you to go be yourself in a better way.
That's interesting.
Collaboration.
Well,
Yeah.
I had an experience I've been thinking about for the last couple of days. I just finally encapsulated it yesterday. I've been wanting to spend more time with people, and I'm an introvert. You know,
Yes,
you
I
you
do
know
know
me.
that.
You know
Yep.
that about me. If there's a
Yep.
big event at church, I'm not going to be there. I don't.
Well, if you are there, you'll be in a rocking chair
I'll,
in the
I'll
corner. I
I'll
know.
I'll
I
go
know where to
find my
find
own
you.
little spot. I'm not a big crowd person, and I'm still not a big crowd person. But I tend to ideally be a hermit. That's the ideal. Is just to be able to think. But I was like, why am I when I'm given an option, I have some free time, I'm I've started reaching out more. I'll be like, I'll go, like, hey, to one of my kids, like, hey, let's go hang out for the evening. Let's go do that. And that's not my normal tendency is to seek out and I thought about it yesterday and I thought, here's why I think has happened. And it's never happened in my life before. And without AI, I don't think it could have happened. I feel like I'm infinitely curious. I'll have some idea that maybe somebody else would want to talk about for like 5 minutes. I want to talk about it for 5 years. Like my mind just goes, and that's not even a joke. I have threads that I've thought about for decades, and I just keep on almost every day coming back to them. And for the first time in my life, I can't put that on. Derrick. Hey, Derrick, let's talk for 72 hours on this topic. Nobody has the space for that, including like even my family doesn't have the space to talk about something they're not particularly interested in for dozens of hours or hundreds of hours. But I crave that. And for the first time in my life, I've been able to mentally explore for 200 hours a particular topic. And I think I've actually, for the first time in my life, reached a satiation point where it's like at the end of the day, I've already spent 8 hours. Whereas before, I wouldn't have been able to do that. It's just the conversational style keeps me in the loop. And if I'm just thinking about it, my thoughts are all over the place. But if I'm talking about it, I can stick on that topic. And I get home having talked about something I'm interested in for 8 hours. And then I'm like done. Like that's enough. I've never had that enough feeling of like, okay, I can set that aside. My mind's not constantly pinging, going, my wife is talking to me, or my kids are talking to me, or somebody's talking to me, and my mind wants to keep on, spiraling on this particular topic. It's for the first time in my life, I'm like, okay, that's done for the day. And it's opened up this, for the first time where I'm like, I want to go hang out with somebody rather than that. And it's not a, man, I really want to do that, but I guess I'll go hang out with somebody. Now it's like, I legitimately want to go hang out with somebody and talk about whatever, something else. And, or my kids or whatever. I'm like, huh. I think that's a positive for me at least. That's not going to be true for everybody, but
Well, have you thought about uh, I don't know who listens to this and faith where they are. I would love to meet them wherever they are, but my belief is that God is infinite,
mm-hmm.
God is omnipresent, God is all knowing, and that whether we're made in his image, which means that there's much like I'm going to have bad eyes because my dad has bad eyes.
Mm-hmm.
I might get some of my uncle's traits. We have some attributes that we share with him, and I think we're seeing some of that played out in what we're creating. And
What do you mean by that?
well, creating AI
Oh,
I think an echo of God creating us, and it's us taking it and putting it in our own package.
mm-hmm.
And we're creating a miniature God that answers all of our questions at all times, no matter where we are. The ability to generate images. So I think it echoes an attribute that points back to the existence of God, and it's really also not going to be sufficient to replace him, because
Right.
I believe we will find ourselves when we're in him. But next up is we want to create miracles. Well, we're going to use this technology to help people
Yeah.
walk. And
Sure.
and then the next thing after that is, well, we want to be immortal. Well, what's the secular version of that? I think that's also a longing that we were made to be
Mm-hmm.
eternal creatures.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're going to upload our conscience somewhere, our thoughts. And the AI experts will tell you that's where this is going, the Neuralink and stuff, that you can be able to read thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
You be able to actually see what people are thinking because there's electronic signals and things in there. So we want to be immortal. So I, at the end of my life, could put the upload of Derrick into the robot that's been created, and it continues from that point forward, but it's not the same thing
Sure.
as the infinite. But
Mm-hmm.
it does mirror it and echo it in this way here. So the more we do this stuff, the more I'm like, oh, there's God. Like, no different than why do we love these stories about good and evil in movies? Because it's actually, I think, where we come from. Like, there's this
Mm-hmm.
great origin story of good versus evil, and good's going to win, but it's going to look like bad wins. That's why we love this in movies.
Mm-hmm.
We love the people with the superpowers that save the day, right? Because that's what God has done. But we're going to continue to recreate that in our own little ways. But if we can take that and give it to Him, it's magnificent to me.
Mm-hmm.
And if someone said, like, it makes it to me easier to talk about God. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
you're crazy to think that heaven exists, Derrick. Why? What do you think's going to happen when you get there? Well, I think that I'm going to sit with God one day, and I'm actually going to have to experience everything I ever did. I'm going to see what I ever did, and I'm going to feel who I ever hurt. I'm going to see the good that I didn't even know that I did. God's going to be right there beside me, not saying shame on you, but let's go over this. It's
Mm-hmm.
prepared you for the now. You
Mm-hmm.
trusted me. And someone said, well, that's crazy. How could they ever know everything you ever thought? Well, last time I checked, you have a camera that loads everything up to a cloud, and you can search anything at any moment. So if that's a reality for you here, the infinite creator mind, how could he not know what's going on? And we're electric, bro. Boogie woogie woogie. And so these things are way better than cameras. And I
Yeah.
got to imagine the infinite one who created all things and is all knowing and is omnipresent. He knows everything going on here and here. And there's something huge and cosmic and spiritual about it. And I love to think of the love that God has in the midst of that. And one day all that's going to be laid bare, and we're going to have to see it. Well, that's kind of what's going on here. It's just
Mm-hmm.
our own version of it, and we're going to create things to make us look better. It's just it flips it, and
Yeah.
perhaps we can use it for good if we stay in connection with the one who is good. Um, but I don't think it's going away. I do think it's an opportunity, though, to talk about uh, the greatness and the goodness of God and to love other people. And
Sure.
if we can use it for that, it can be quite amazing. That a tool for that. So, uh, just a thought, not a sermon.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. It's very yeah.
I know
Just
this isn't a faith podcast, but cut me. I'm gonna bleed that at some point.
yeah.
If you get me
Yeah.
talking. So
That yeah. It's very fascinating. It's interesting because a lot of those things that you were talking about and the movement. I think about the movement that we've had over the last 2,000 years. It has been an exploration and creativity that I think we were created for. What we do with it can be good or bad, but
hmm
I
well,
think
I
it's.
think there's someone who can guide us through it.
Mm-hmm.
And but it is the wild, wild west right now. There's
Yeah.
so much to explore. Um,
What excites you about, like, there's I think there's some real downsides that people are talking about. I'm reading a lot of articles and books and
sure.
stuff on what are the possible paths forward, uh, and how do we act in light of all of those possibilities, and since we don't know exactly what it's going to look like, what do we do now, and how do we parent our kids not knowing what they're going to enter into at a much bigger delta than we ever have in human history. Even the biggest shifts, the moment the industrial revolution happened, for the next couple of years, I think our each month there's more happening in terms of shifting human behavior possibility, whether it's happening practically or not, but what's possible is a bigger shift than any other moment in human history, a cross section. And how do you parent your kids in light of that? I've got an 11-year-old, a 14-year-old, and two 18-year-olds. And the next 10 years is going to be a wild ride. So is there some downsides to it? Yeah. My perspective is I probably can't, if somebody's going to try and take over the world or something like that, whatever, if you go to the size of the AI doomsdayers kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
like it's going to take over, kill us all, and then the rest of the world's history is going to be artificial or something like that. And there are people saying that. And I'm even watching the people who are creating it saying, there's some percentage of a chance that that could happen. And I'm like, okay,
Yep.
all right, this is exciting. And yet you can't stop because someone else is going to do it. So, if OpenAI stopped and said, okay, it's not worth it, it's going to continue because other people are going to, pick it up and, at some level, barring some kind of natural catastrophe or something, it's probably going to
Yeah.
continue.
OpenAI could end up being MySpace.
Yeah, it could. Yeah,
Right. It was
could
the
be.
thing, and now it.
Now,
Remember we
yeah.
did that?
Yeah, so I don't think trying to regulate any individual thing is going to stop the general, but I think there are some negative possibilities, like anything. It's a little exaggerated because it's happening so quickly and it's at such a massive scale. But I'm trying to think, like, okay, whether that or some version on the spectrum of what's possible from like, some version of a relative utopian, people are talking about, what it might look like, and they have a case to make for it on the negative and on the positive. What kind of things do I want to do now, regardless of what the next 10, 20, 30 years looks like? Cultivating an intelligent community who are thinking about these things, not siloing myself, is one thing. Getting perspective on what I think human flourishing looks like, as best as I can, and to start to move in that direction myself for me and my family and community, and contribute towards that. And the other one, this was as soon as I heard somebody say that, is Nate Jones, who's one of my favorite people on AI. He said, "Be someone who can solve valuable problems."
Mm-hmm.
And whether things go positive and or things go negative, you're going to want to be someone who can solve valuable problems regardless. And so I'm looking for those kinds of things. And so I'm excited about some stuff. For the most part, I'm pretty optimistic about it as far as I have any influence on it. But what is there anything like you're excited as you think about the future,
Oh yeah.
of AI?
Yeah.
What are you excited about?
I'm excited about how it's going to impact the education world. Um, in the same way that YouTube has allowed us to learn so many different things.
Right.
I mean, I can do things on my car that I wouldn't normally. I would have to go to a mechanic to do that. I could, do it myself. I think that's going to happen. It's going to be a great tutor in many ways. I saw an article the other day about at least 6 major universities adapting chat to where when you come in as a freshman, it's part of you're given this, and that they hope that it becomes kind of like an assistant to them. And so and I think Duke University was one of them. Again, got to fact check that stuff, but they're already thinking, how do we integrate this rather than run from it to help our people learn? So my son 13, I think it's going to be a different world for him. So I'm trying to like learn it. Somebody said to me once, as a parent, never stop learning. So games, right? You're good at that too. I want to know the game world he's in. I do think one day it's going to be really close to Ready Player One world. I don't think that book and that movie, that story and time, that framework, I think is totally plausible. So I'm excited about that. That's cool. Those are the things you always dreamed of in video games, and it would have been so helpful when you had a bad teacher to say, help me understand this concept at home. And so that excites me. Medicine really excites me. The ability to create new medicines, new cures in ways that humans could not ever think. I'm hopeful that they can, AI can help us think about cancer in a way that's never been done, and maybe even be put into miniature robotic treatments the size of cells that can go in and kill. The nanobot sort of thing with AI could be a really powerful thing in a good way. So I get excited about that. As far as like faith and religion,
Mm-hmm.
it's an opportunity for people to ask the larger question, like I was saying earlier, what does this all mean? And so it's a great opportunity for discussion. But like the other day, I was reading a book on, and the guy was talking about free will and versus this, predestination, or are we robots? And I was able to say, hey, make me a chart that compares this view and this view with AI. And it was
Mm-hmm.
really helpful tool to
Mm-hmm.
sit there and look at it. So I got to imagine there's a lot of people who are asking it questions about faith that they would not maybe ask someone else. I'm just hopeful that it doesn't stay there, but I see an opportunity to generate discussion that it generates, because a lot of times people are going to be more inclined to talk to a place they feel safe. And so there's an opportunity for loving people there somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know what that looks like. I don't know what AI looks like in helping, again, with learning the Bible, but I think there's a huge opportunity there. So that stuff really, really excites me. I don't want it to replace humans, because I think humans are beautiful and I love
Mm-hmm.
humans. And that's why we're making it try to act like a human, because we're all made
Yeah.
for the connection. So,
Yeah,
but
it's interesting. What you just brought up, I'll have to think about this. I like being at the hospital. I've always liked being at the hospital, not when I'm in pain and there to get something fixed, but the specific thing I like. I've heard people say, "Man, I hate being at the hospital." Which I get. Some people have had some real bad experiences, and it brings up trauma. And I've had some terrible experiences at hospital, but for whatever reason, it's always wonderful to me because I get bored by small talk. I'm pre-bored by small talk. I'm not the kind of person that enjoys that, or talking about sports or whatever. That's just, I don't know. It's not my thing. But when you go to the hospital, by default, if you're there and not staff, but even if you are staff, you're constantly intersecting shift. Something I just broke an arm. What was normal yesterday is now my arm's broken. And what does that mean? Or I was just in a car accident. Or I just realized, maybe my heart or maybe cancer or whatever. If you're in the hospital, unless it's for something super minor, but even then, you're even when you go to the hospital because of a rash or something and you just need an ointment or whatever, you're there around people who are in transition. Something has shifted, something bad has happened, something negative, and anytime I can get into the zone, just go through my daily life and not ask a lot of questions and just keep on going. But then you end up at the hospital, and it's like, okay, wait a second, what's this all about? And what it just whether it's me going through it or just being around other people who are going through terrible times, it raises questions, and so I like being there in a hospital waiting room. Even if I was, when I was there with my son, people are just asking more interesting questions than going through whatever the normal day. And I think artificial intelligence, for people that are at least aware of what it can do and don't think it just can write some cool limericks or reprocess an essay into an Eminem style rap or whatever, like you can play around with it, but if you actually understand what it can do, it disrupts. It's a disruptor, and it makes you think, okay, wait a second, time out. What are we doing here? And that right there is a place I love to have conversations
mm-hmm.
Of any sort, because they're just interesting conversations that kind of go a little bit deeper than, how, how is Auburn and Alabama doing in football or whatever.
Mm-hmm. It's a teaching tool. I mean, in the faith world I'm in, if you think about it, you may have a question like, oh, I'm going to go run Ask Chat. Well, that same tendency or that same longing, you can flip that and say, I'm going to ask God.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want it to become a replacement for prayer, but it is a tool to be like, well, you can think, oh, I need to ask a question about that. That's actually how we're meant, I believe, to go to God
Mm-hmm.
and say, I want to invite you into every space here rather than run to the little world I created for knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
But so that's a tool to talk about. What is prayer? Well, have you ever gone to ChatGPT for 18,000 times a day? Yeah. What if you replaced half of those with asking that question to God
Yeah.
and expected that you don't get an instant response,
Mm-hmm.
but looking for something, right? Then that's a tool,
Right.
to understand the world and teach it. Because I do see it mirrors so much of what we're longing for with God.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it's a bad. Again, I think it's neutral. But anything we have on Earth, we can replace humans with, or we can use for good or bad. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm not optimistic that we're going to use it for good, but I'm going to try to be one who does, if
Mm-hmm.
that makes sense,
Yeah.
and try to be encouraging and hopeful about it. Because, like you said, we could sit here and worry about the sinister and everything, and then have no life. Yeah, because we can't control that. We can't control the next person that's going to do it.
Sure.
And so, well, yeah, you can. You need to be an activist. You need to get involved with politics and da da da. Yeah, I hear you, but still, I'm talking about tomorrow morning
Mm-hmm.
when I'm at the grocery store. What does it have to do? And it's going to be integrated. And people who say I don't use it, you do. When you go to a search engine, you use it,
You're using
right?
it. Or if you go to
You
the grocery store,
that something there is using it.
Publix corporations figure out how to use
Mm-hmm.
AI to, to do stuff and that kind of thing. Well, this has been fantastic. And of course, we'll continue the conversation, I'm sure, for
Yes, we're going to
decades.
have you on ours. We're going to have you
Oh,
on our
yeah.
podcast to talk about AI,
Yeah.
and we'll
Well,
hit you with the questions.
yeah, that sounds good. I have a lot of thoughts. Well, I've got a series of quick questions. You can just shotgun some answers.
Okay.
What's in your experience with artificial intelligence and using it? What's what's is there some tool that you found that's been really useful? Not just ChatGPT, but is there any other tools you've been using, or a resource or a podcast or anything like that that's helpful to you in thinking through it or using it?
Um, I listen a lot to the Sean Ryan podcast, and he has a lot of experts on about AI,
Oh, okay, good,
and
fantastic.
they've been really fascinating to listen
Hmm.
to. Um, Also, I really have found the Otter AI. Otter,
Mm-hmm.
you use this, the Google, where it'll take a bunch of notes for you.
Yeah,
Like I'm going to go to a conference in this fall, and I'm going to, rather than worry about taking down every note, I can record it, put it
mm-hmm.
in there,
Yeah,
and I know I've captured it. And so that's really helpful to me
mm-hmm.
too, as a tool for, because I'm the sort of guy who has to write stuff down. And so I wish I would have had that in seminary, where I
Yeah,
could have just hit record and sat there and interacted
yeah.
rather than worried about every note for the test.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah, that's one of the huge benefits, I think, because if I'm taking notes, I'm not thinking about what's being said right now. I'm thinking about what I'm trying to capture down, and so
Yep.
it's always this lag, and so I miss some
Yep.
percentage. I don't know if I told you this. I'm thinking about that. I'm the clerk for the leadership group at church, and so I take meeting notes and process them into minutes and stuff, and I have to record certain things in certain ways and that kind of thing. I have created a custom GPT where I just take my normal handwritten notes, I take a picture of it, it's done, and then I can play with it.
Oh,
But
it translates it over to Word for you.
yeah, what I send out,
That's awesome.
it's I've the instructions are pretty heavy duty. I have a roster of everybody that should be there. It references that roster against who I've written down is there. If they don't show up, it will put them on the absent list. It formats all the motions into motions for passed or not passed. And but what that does, that used to take me about an hour to type it out, double check, make sure I have everybody's name spelled correctly. And because I don't memorize everybody how they spell everybody's name, it would take me an hour to process the notes till it was ready to send out in an email. Now it's literally 3 minutes. Take the picture. I run it through O3, which does a really good job at processing it through the custom GPT. And then in 3 minutes, I have the finished product. And then I can spend 5 or 10 minutes actually playing with it,
Making
making
it
it
better.
better, making
Mm-hmm.
it more enjoyable to read. Whereas before, I get to the end of the hour and it's like, I've got to get out of here. I've got to get to work or whatever. Now it kind of opens up that
It
space.
takes that step for you and
Yeah.
allowing you to enter into the thing that's
Yeah.
actually probably more important, and that is,
Yeah.
what does this say, and is the content correct? And
Yeah. So that's been a fun
that's
tool, but
awesome.
that's that's cool. Uh, what is maybe this might be a similar question, but like, what's the first app, or maybe it's not an app? When you wake up in the morning, what's your kind of go to? Do you open up the app to look at news? Do you open up ChatGPT? Do you open up a notebook, the
The
Bible?
Bible app. Yep.
Yeah.
I doing a 2-year reading plan, and then when I'm done with it, I do it again.
Mm-hmm.
I'm way behind. I'm 5 chapters behind on Deuteronomy right now because I choose to read the Psalm.
Oh, do you?
in the morning,
Yeah.
and then I'll read the Deuteronomy later, but I can listen to it as well. But that's the first. I try to say a prayer. God, you're welcome in this space today,
Hmm.
and then I try to read that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's typically my rhythm.
Yeah. Is there
I don't want to
some
touch my phone for anything else because it'll be
get sucked in?
sucked into something. Yeah.
Yeah. What is, I've been paying attention to this and just trying to not, I've been trying to feel it more than predict it or try and make it happen. But I've noticed as I spend so much time talking to ChatGPT and developing stories and systems and doing different things, um, the real world has become more enjoyable. Like the
Hmm.
actual physical world, something that I would have taken for granted, a coffee cup or whatever, is suddenly just a little bit more enjoyable, has a little bit more value because it's in contrast to this kind of ethereal, conceptual space that I operate in so much. Uh, and so, is there anything that's becoming noticeably more enjoyable for you as we think about what's coming and what could develop? What do you
I
think
mean,
is more valuable
to,
to you?
to me, just the conversations that come from it. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I think they get closer to existential questions,
Mm-hmm.
and that is more than talking about the weather,
Mm-hmm.
and I love that.
Yeah.
And like, we can talk about AI with anybody and at least have a decent conversation.
Mm-hmm.
The responses may be all over the place, but we very closely get to like what's the meaning of existence pretty
Right.
quick.
Pretty quick. Yeah. A
Pretty
little
quick.
faster now. That's
Yeah.
interesting.
What's
Yeah.
the purpose of humans? I mean,
That's.
that question is at the
Mhm.
forefront of any of this.
Isn't that interesting?
Hmm.
Is that something I thought about before? Sometimes I'm sure, maybe I read a book that triggered that, but now it's like, okay, wait, I can do this now. What does
Yeah.
that mean about that?
It's like philosophy
Hmm.
and ethics combined
Yeah.
into existential, I don't know, questions about our origin
Hmm.
that we're faced with if we really read this stuff.
Yeah, it's very
Uh,
fascinating. It's
it's a
fascinating.
fun time to be alive. I
It
mean,
really is.
also a scary time to be alive.
It really is.
But
Yeah.
I've got you talk to people who are older. I do a Bible study with the elderly here, and they will tell you. I mean, they're in their 90s.
Uh-huh.
They will tell you there has never been anything that they've ever seen in their entire life like this. There's
Yeah.
one woman there is like 105.
Hmm.
We are living in something that is like they don't have a category for,
Right.
and they've
Do,
seen a lot.
do you ever actually do you ever talk to them? Like, are they aware of what's happening?
Hmm. Yeah, they watch most of it they're
Ah,
seeing on the news,
sure. Yeah.
but they're just they think the world is gone.
Yeah. 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 There's no category for
They're not
that.
interested in learning how to do it either. They're like, nope.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of funny. I mean, I'm really glad that this happened. I didn't expect anything like this. If it ever was going to be figured out, the LLM model, um, I expected it in maybe 100, 200 years from now. So the fact
Right.
that all of a sudden the future kind of came back to meet me and I wake up in what to me is a future
Mhm.
experience.
Well, you can
It's
thank the aliens for speeding
the
that up.
aliens said they
Yep.
did, yeah, they
Yep.
seeded the crystals with
They
just the right
brought they
stuff.
brought that technology
That's
earlier. Yep.
that's
From
fantastic.
Krypton.
That's right. That's right. Well, hey, how can people find you? Do you have a website? I know you have a podcast.
Yes.
What are
Our
what?
podcast is called Into the Wild.
Mm-hmm.
It's on Spotify and Apple, and there's a lot of things called Into the Wild apparently. So you have to search Into the Wild and then search under Southwood
Yeah.
PCA or
Mm-hmm.
southwood.org/ITW, and it's
Mm-hmm.
got all the links. It's also in Vimeo.
Yeah.
It may go on YouTube one day, but a lot of people don't watch them; they listen. I found.
Yeah.
I do have a website. I play music, so you can look up Derrick Harris, DerrickHarris on Spotify, Apple,
Uh-huh.
all the places, and my website is dharris.me. I
Okay.
don't use it much, but I put stuff up there.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like a microphone for what I do.
Well, great. Well, yeah, I'll put that in the show notes so people
Yeah.
can find you if they want to check you out. Yeah, and I am jealous of your voice. I remember the first time that you sang. Gracie and I just looked at each other like, "What the heck? We have an actual like this is
Oh,
this is a world class voice that just
that's
came
kind.
into the building."
I just love to write, but I'm just a dad like you.
Yeah,
You know, I
Yep.
still don't know what to do with it, but I sure do love to sing. So
Well,
thank
hey,
you.
man, I appreciate your time, and
It's been fun.
I'll catch up with you. Now I won't hold back from calling you, asking you what you're doing with AI, because I've been waiting for this so we could actually have the conversation here. So we'll keep the conversation going, but I
Okay.
appreciate your
Yeah,
time.
we need to keep it going.
All right, man. I appreciate you.
All right. Appreciate you. Thanks so much.
See you, Derek.
See ya. Bye.
All right. Woohoo. All right, guys. Well, I appreciate you being here today. I'm going to jump off stream. I know that you can't see me, but maybe you can hear me. I'll catch you later.